Hello, my name is Isabel Freer, and I'm one of the producers of The Uncertain Kingdom. And we are here tonight to discuss Motherland, which is one of our fantastic documentaries on volume one of our anthology of films. I'm joined by the film's director, Ellen Evans, and by one of the contributors, Ken Morgan. Motherland is a powerful and evocative documentary that traces the experiences of three Jamaican-born Brits who have been forcibly returned to their home country by the British government. We're going to pick up the Q&A where Ellen is talking about the genesis of the film.
Don't know what happens to these people once they are deported, and we basically felt like it was a really underreported issue, and that we needed to go to Jamaica to find these people and hear their stories. I mean, for example, with Ken's story, when the Windrush scandal broke, and it was all these stories which hadn't been heard before and hadn't been reported about. Ken, how many years were you living in Jamaica, Ken, before Amelia Gentleman spoke to you?
About 20
Yeah,
years.
20 years. Yeah. So that, it feels like when people get into these situations and they are kind of divorced from the UK, we totally lose all sense of what's happening to them.
That just seems extraordinary to me, that there's no that people are literally put on a plane and that's it, that the British government ends any sort of responsibility or care or respect for anything at that point.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the British government washes their hands. A.T., who is the Mancunian guy in the film, when he was put on the plane, I don't think he even had a bag. He just had the clothes on his back, and he was being sent to a country that he hadn't lived in since he was 2 years old, and where he had absolutely no family, no friends, and no support. So yeah, I mean, it's a kind of exile.
For those who haven't seen the film yet, can you tell us a little bit about A.T.'s story? There's A.T. is one of the contributors, and also Tremaine, and then Ken. It would be great to hear more about your experiences as well.
Yeah, so the film has three narratives in it. There's two young men, and then there's Ken's story as well. The stories have things in common, which is that all three of these people have gone through a similar experience of having to build their lives completely from scratch in a country which, essentially felt foreign to them at first. Obviously we can see how at home Ken is now, so that's what they had in common, but they are different issues, and we shouldn't confuse them. So the two young men had come to the UK under the age. So yeah, A.T. was 2 and Tremaine was 6. They had come over. I think Tremaine came over by himself because his mother and his sister were actually murdered, and that was part of the reason he came to the UK. And he came to live with, I think, his grandmother. And then with A.T., he came over with his mother. She took him, and then she built a life for herself in the UK, and all of his younger siblings are British. However, both A.T. and Tremaine did not become British citizens. So they grew up in the UK. They were always on leave to remain. They weren't illegal immigrants. They were living here legally. Both of them got into trouble. They both served prison sentences. I think Tremaine's was quite short. It was both of them. It was their first offence. Tremaine's was a short sentence, and A.T.'s was longer. And then essentially after, once they had served their time, instead of being released back into society and back to their families, they were both deported. This is, it's basically the law here. If you are not British and you serve a sentence which is over 12 months, then you're liable for deportation. The Home Office are supposed to take into account your human rights, so that would include your right to family life, and so on, but clearly they contravene this all the time, because both Tremaine and AT were sent to a country in which that they didn't have any family, they didn't have any support network, and their families and support networks were here in the UK. And obviously, having spent their entire lives in the UK, they very much considered themselves to be British.
And they were both given sort of literally 12 hours notice before.
Very little notice. Very little notice. I don't think AT fully understood what was happening.
And is he 20, 21?
He's young. I can't remember how old exactly now, but he was a teenager when he went to prison, and yeah, I think he's about 22, 23.
Yeah.
So both of them had served their time, and should have basically been rehabilitated, if that's what we believe the prison system is for, and should have been able to come back into society, but they weren't. They were deported by the British government to a place that they had no link to, and neither of them can return. That's the most shocking thing about it. Neither of them can ever come back to the UK, and AT has been separated from his mother and all of his siblings, and unless they come to Jamaica, he doesn't have a chance of seeing them again. And that kind of rift is heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking situation to be in. And then, so that's the story of the young boys, and it's a different story to the Windrush story. It's a very different story to Ken's story, but what they have in common is having to start completely afresh, and basically having their Britishness completely rejected by the UK government, not recognised.
But then equally not feeling any Jamaican in any way other than initially being born there.
Yeah.
So they're stuck in this no man's land.
Yeah, and many of the things that Ken says in the film, the boys echoed back to me. Not feeling. Yeah, it's interesting because Tremaine sounds more Jamaican than AT. AT has a very Mancunian accent, but even Tremaine, he doesn't understand patois, so he finds it difficult to talk to people, and people find it difficult to understand him. And AT, people always assume that he's on holiday.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Ken, you're shaking your head. I'm sure some of these.
Yeah.
Ken, can we hear about your experiences, which, as Ellen said, are very different to AT and Tremaine's?
Well, there are similarities that we, as Helen said, we all had to start from nothing. I remember when they stopped me at the airport and they took away my passport, which is a British passport, and they said I had to go to the British High Commission to sort it out. And I said, sort out what? They said they would tell you. And I got to eventually I got to the British High Commission, and it wasn't sorted. They didn't return my passport, and I was just abandoned. And I remember standing outside of the High Commission after I'd had that talk. And I don't even think I could buy lunch. I'm in Jamaica for the first time since I was 9, 10. And, but I was an adult, and I didn't know what to do. And yeah. But we have a lot of things inside of us that we draw on, and we think about things, and we look around and we figure things out. And I can say after so many years that we've managed to survive. And survival back then, back in the day, you have to say, survival was touch and go. Survival is not like it is now. And it's not at all, it was not at all like, okay, you can live in Jamaica and be very comfortable. And if you have some money and you have a job and you have home, Jamaica is paradise. The moment you're in Jamaica and have no money, sorry for you. I'm sorry for you. Life is not going to be particularly easy. So you have to struggle, you have to fight. But if you can work, you can, you know, you look around and you say, well, there are people here who've never even been to the airport and they've made it. So why can't I? One of the things is that at the time, I was a little bit more than disappointed, but everybody reacts in a different way. So a lot of Windrush people have had difficulties. You hear the stories. People have lost their job. They've lost their homes that they worked for 40 years to buy. They lost their car. They lost access to health services. And because we're all different people, although we're basically from the same place, we react and respond to these things in different ways. And some people, it will affect harder than others. Some people are able to face adversity and to triumph, and other people, well, when you come to Jamaica, you'll see them sleeping in old buildings and so on. They just are lost, completely lost. And so there's a component. When you're in England and you go around the corner and you see a van that says go home, one of these go home vans, and you're scared to death, you're terrified that, a lot of these people, that's what I understand. It didn't happen to me, thank God. But I know how they feel when they feel that they're going to be deported because they thought they were okay. And then all of a sudden the laws are changed and you have to, everybody is saying, papers please, papers please. You have to prove your immigration status. And a lot of people are scared and the whole system has an impact on them. Then in respect to the situation we're in now, where most of us are in lockdown and COVID-19 is rampant and so on, you find a lot of Caribbean people, a lot of people from the West Indies who are impacted by COVID-19. And a lot of people do not understand that there are non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, etc., and lifestyle diseases, as they call them. And if you are living 24/7 in fear, you cannot really imagine what stress does to your body. A lot of these people develop all these conditions because they're living in such awful stress. People are becoming homeless. People who have worked all their lives, who have never been in touch with the police, the justice system, and all of a sudden they find themselves destitute. So when I speak, sometimes I can barely speak about my own personal thing without reflecting on what other people are also suffering. I think when we have a voice, we have to not just think of ourselves, but remember others who are probably even suffering more than us. Because yes, it was hard for me. I mean, very, very hard. But sometimes you're strong enough. God never gives you more than you can bear, more than you can manage. You are prepared in many ways that you didn't know you were prepared for. I had no idea living in England all my life that I was entrepreneurial. But when I came here and found out that I had to make money and I had nobody to fall back on and I had no support, no network, nothing, I had to figure it out. I had to become entrepreneurial. And I discovered that I was prepared. God had prepared me, given me some skills and talents and so on. Yeah. So that's basically there are things to discuss, more important things than um, 20 years ago. There are things like the Home Office and what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, I'd love to sort of, asking to hear your thoughts on the Home Office is probably too big a question for another 15 minutes. But certainly from the press, I know that the Windrush cases are just being handled in the most extraordinarily messy and confusing and sort of complicated way. But I also feel that perhaps the pandemic, I don't know if you would agree with this, but the pandemic has brushed some things under the carpet that might have otherwise been getting more attention. Would you guys agree with that?
Well, Windrush certainly has, Windrush because of not just the pandemic, but Brexit. Sorry, Helen, I just jumped in, sorry.
No, go for it, go for it.
Windrush has obviously come up the front pages, and you can tell. In 2018, I came to England. I was invited to come by the government of all people, but they didn't pay my fare. And yeah, so I was in England, and after a lot of stuff, I did sessions with the Guardian and so on. I spoke to the staff and that kind of thing. I was sent, they gave me a biometric card. We did the biometrics, the scans, the fingerprints and so on and so on. And they gave me indefinite leave to remain, which is ridiculous because the law of 1948 says I'm a citizen for the rest of my life. I came to England on the 24th of June, 1960. And all of these things and these cutoff dates are like from the 70s or the 80s. It should not apply to me. I did all the documentation, sent it back into them, and a year and a half later, the Home Office has not even responded to me. Not a telephone call, not a letter, nothing. I have some lawyers, and they have heard nothing either. Sometimes they just send me an email and say, there's nothing for us to update you on. And they're, yeah, that's the situation.
Yeah. And Ellen, just coming back to the film, the style that you took and the form that the film follows is very intimate and very personal. The way that you've framed everything, the way that everything is shot, is very, very distinctive. Can you talk a little about those choices that you made?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, first of all, huge shout out to Tom Doran, the cinematographer, because he just did the most incredible job. I can see Ken nodding. He did a really good job. The film is an unusual style, right? Because it's all sit down interviews. It's an interview led film, but it feels quite poetic. And we did that for a reason. I really wanted the film to be about feeling and emotion, and for people to understand how it, for an audience to understand how it feels to be in this position. And we did that through the pace of the film. Another big shout out to Jamie Catterkey, who was the most incredible editor. So the film is really slow because it's also chronicling the experiences of people who have spent a lot of their lives waiting, right? We framed it in a very specific way. The boys are very small in the frame. They're very lost in their surroundings because this is all still very new to them. They haven't found their place in Jamaica yet necessarily. Ken is shot differently. You know, he'd been there for 20 years, and I think wouldn't be coming back to the UK anyway now. Oh, he doesn't know. Still to be decided. But you know,
when the pandemic is over.
When the pandemic is over and things are a bit safer, yeah. So Ken has found his place in the world more. So we shot him, Tom framed him differently to the two boys who are shot very small. And then also, a key thing is it's an interview-led film, but how do you inject a sense of life and vitality into something which could otherwise just be talking heads? Well, we were really influenced by a film called Hale County this evening, which is a beautiful documentary. And the director is a photographer, and it's basically chronicling life in Hale County in America. And it's through these kind of moments of everyday life that you get a picture of the place. And we basically transferred that technique to Jamaica, and Tom was just shooting all the time. We would just be in cafes and he'd be shooting, we'd be in the car, he'd be shooting. And then Jamie watched all of this amazing footage and put together these beautiful montages. And through these montages, we wanted to get a sense of Jamaica in the place, but also to see Jamaica through the eyes of, for example, Tremaine and AT, who still feel a little lost there. So we avoided the kind of picture postcard view. Jamaica's a beautiful place. I mean, it is incredible. But we didn't want to shoot this typical kind of like beaches or carnival, because that isn't necessarily their experience. We were trying to see it through their eyes. Yes, a lot of the shots are quite lonely as well.
Lonely and incredibly haunting as well.
Yeah. And then obviously, the film begins with these rotating shots of the overgrown colonial buildings. And we end with those shots as well. Because you can't have a film which is about immigration without talking about history, and particularly colonial history, right? I mean, only colonial history. But and so we wanted to kind of there's a line that Ken says which is just incredible, where he talks about the scars that the British had left on Jamaica, and we wanted to show those scars. Sorry, this answer has been incredibly rambling.
No. It's such a huge part of the film. It's great to hear more about it. But it is now 8:30. By the way, I really apologize if you can hear my small child crying. I hope not everybody can. But yeah, just one last question that someone has sent in. Do you intend to use the film for advocacy or lobbying for the British government? Ellen, I know that you've got some things lined up, so it'd be great to hear about those.
Yeah. So we've been working with BID, which is Bail for Immigration Detainees. They do a lot of advocacy work. So we would like them to be able to use the film in ways which are impactful. Alice, our producer, has in the past shown, she showed her debut documentary in Parliament actually, and it was used in an inquiry. So I hope Alice can maybe pull some strings, because I would love to use the film for advocacy work for sure, because the strength of the film is that you get to actually hear these people's voices and see them. And the thing about print articles is they can be kind of rationally effective, but they're never going to be as emotive as a film. So yeah, I think that it's
facts and figures. You can read those again and again and again, and they can be shocking and have an impact on you. But as you say, seeing the three stories that you so powerfully document and so brilliantly document, I think it has a real long-lasting effect. Ken, thank you so much for joining us.
May,
And
may, may I say a final word before you do?
absolutely, absolutely.
People who have seen the film think that I read from a script. And I have to tell you that Ellen had put me so much at ease. She has this ability that she probably doesn't even, but she's so personable. And we were talking, I didn't know I was talking so much. I didn't know that the feelings that I tried for years to keep down, to suppress, I didn't know those feelings were coming back. And she was able to, without a heavy hand, she was able to bring that back up to the surface. And so a lot of people think it was all prepared, and none of it was. When I saw it, I thought, what the heck happened there? Because it was so natural and so real. And she's very talented, totally unprepared. But it looks as though it was, every detail was put in place.
Yeah.
As though it was all done with meticulous Hollywood thing, and nothing like that. She just shot it.
Well, Ken, you are also incredibly eloquent, and I think that Ellen is incredibly talented and skilled. But I think you do speak incredibly well, and were able to convey your feelings and your experiences, yeah, incredibly concisely and eloquently. But Ken, to your point, I guess for those people that don't know, Ellen, it was just you, Alice, your producer, and Tom that got on a plane to Jamaica with your kit.
Yeah, it was an absolutely tiny crew, and we paired up with we had 2 crew members in Jamaica as well. We had a production coordinator, Angeline. I mean, production coordinator is a fancy word because she was the woman who was working at the charity that we linked up with, and then she became our kind of production. I keep saying production coordinator, you know what I mean? And then we had Nigel as well, who was our driver / location manager. But it was a tiny crew. And then on the day that we shot Ken's interview, it was just me and Tom. And I think Tom did an incredible job because the room that we shot the interview in had it had no windows, right? There was no natural light coming in, and it was only fluorescent strip lighting. So Tom, and we didn't have any lights of our own, so Tom had to do basically perform magic with just kind of bits of diffuser, like white sheets and some like blackout stuff, and basically redirect the light that was coming from these fluorescent strip lights. And I was recording the sound at the same time as interviewing.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a very DIY experience.
Well, for anyone who hasn't seen Motherland, it is in volume 1 of The Uncertain Kingdom. And yeah, I urge you to see it. It's as I said, incredibly powerful and evocative, and important. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Ken. And thank you everyone who has been watching this. Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.